It started with a phone call. I'll never forget the way my heart dropped when I heard it. The sound of his voice, shaky and uncertain, coming through the receiver. But I didn't know it then, how it would unravel everything, how it would change everything. I hadn't been expecting it. We hadn't spoken all day, not since the morning. Caleb had left for work early and I'd gone about my day, busy with household chores and emails. The usual stuff. But the call, it changed the entire atmosphere. It wasn't the call itself, it was the question he asked me. Grace, did you have lunch with him again? I froze. It was the first time he'd mentioned Peter in days, and suddenly I felt a lump in my throat. Peter, my colleague, my coworker. Someone Caleb had barely acknowledged before. But now out of nowhere, Caleb was asking about him like he was some sort of threat. Caleb, what are you talking about? I managed to choke out, my voice too thin, too guarded. I told you, I'm just working with him. Nothing is going on. There was silence on the other end. I could practically hear him trying to decide whether to believe me, whether to trust me. Then he spoke, his voice strained, almost broken. Grace, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending I'm okay with it. You and him. I don't like it. My hands were shaking now, the phone slipping slightly from my grip. It wasn't the anger in his voice, it was the fear. The fear I hadn't seen before. The kind of fear that made someone question everything, question what was real and what wasn't. What do you mean, you can't keep pretending? Caleb, this is ridiculous. He's just a colleague. You're acting crazy. I could feel my words getting more desperate, more defensive. My pulse was racing. Was I really defending Peter? Or was I defending myself from something deeper? Something I didn't want to face. Please don't lie to me, Caleb said, his voice quivering now. You think I don't notice how much time you're spending with him? How you two look when you're talking? I can't ignore it anymore. The words hit like a slap, but I couldn't respond. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was overreacting, but something held me back. Something gnawed at my insides, twisting and turning. I had no idea where this was coming from. It wasn't the Caleb I knew. The man I married had always trusted me, had always understood that work relationships were just that, work relationships. But then, why was I feeling so guilty? I hung up the phone in a daze. The room felt cold and the silence after the call was deafening. I tried to shake it off. I tried to convince myself it was just another one of Caleb's moods. He had his moments, I knew that. But this was different. It was the way he'd spoken to me, the way his trust in me had cracked. This wasn't about Peter anymore, it was about Caleb's insecurities, his need to control the situation. But I couldn't help feeling that maybe there was more to it. Something I wasn't seeing, something hiding beneath the surface. A few hours later, Caleb came home. His eyes were dull, like he hadn't slept in days. I watched him as he walked through the door, expecting me to say something, to apologize or explain, but I didn't know what to say anymore. Are you all right? I asked, my voice softer than I meant it to be. You've been acting strange lately. He didn't answer right away. He just stood there, staring at me, his hands trembling at his sides. It was the kind of look that made me question everything I thought I knew about him. I just don't want to lose you, Grace, he said finally, his voice so quiet that I almost didn't hear it. I don't want to lose you to him. I blinked, shocked by the confession, and for the first time in a long while I felt the distance between us. Caleb had always been the one who needed reassurance, but this was different. It wasn't about me anymore, it was about him, about his control over me. Over us. And in that moment I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just losing Caleb to his jealousy, I was losing myself. The next few days were a blur. Caleb became a shadow in the house, distant and cold, as if he was standing on the edge of some invisible cliff, too afraid to look down but unable to step back. I tried to talk to him, tried to make things normal, but every time I opened my mouth it felt like I was speaking to a wall. His eyes were tired, his face drained of the warmth I used to see. It was as if the Caleb I knew had vanished, leaving only a ghost behind. I couldn't help but wonder if it was my fault. Had I somehow caused this? Every time I thought about Peter, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Yes, Peter and I had been spending a lot of time together at work, but it was all professional. He was a colleague, a damn good one, someone who helped with projects I struggled with, someone I trusted. But why was Caleb so obsessed with him? Why was I starting to feel like the one who was wrong? It was the third evening after the phone call when I decided to confront him. I couldn't keep pretending things were okay when I felt like I was walking on eggshells around him. I needed to understand what was happening, why everything had become so twisted. So after dinner, when Caleb sat slouched on the couch with his laptop open, I took a deep breath and sat beside him. Caleb, we need to talk. He didn't look up from the screen, didn't even flinch when I said his name. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the words fighting their way to the surface, but I hesitated. Was I ready to hear the truth? Was I ready to face what he had become? He finally sighed, slowly closing the laptop and turning toward me. About what? About everything, I whispered. About you, about us. About Peter. I watched him stiffen, his body going rigid at the mention of my coworker's name. You really want to talk about him? His voice was a mix of frustration and something else, something darker, more possessive. Yes, I said, finding my courage. I don't understand. Why are you making him such a big deal? We're just working together. It's not like that. That's the problem, Caleb replied, his voice low but sharp. It is like that. It's always been like that with you. You spend more time with him than with me. And when you come home, it's like I don't even exist anymore. What am I supposed to think? My breath caught in my throat. His words stung more than I'd ever anticipated. I wanted to scream, to tell him that it wasn't true, that I hadn't changed, that I still loved him. But his words had found their mark, they dug deep and unsettled something inside of me. Caleb, I love you. But this isn't about Peter, is it? This is about you, your fear of losing me. I can't keep living in this prison you're building around me. He didn't respond immediately. His face was unreadable, like he was weighing the truth of my words against the weight of his own insecurities. Then, almost as if he were trying to convince himself, he said, I just don't trust him. And I don't trust you when you're around him. He's a problem, Grace. I stood up abruptly, unable to stay still any longer. I'm not doing this anymore. I won't be controlled by your jealousy. If you can't trust me, then what's the point of us even being together? I didn't know where the words were coming from, but they felt right. They felt like the first time in days I was being honest with myself. Caleb looked up at me, his face pale and his eyes wide. For a moment, I thought he was going to say something else, something that would make this all go away, something to fix what had already been broken. But he didn't. Instead, he muttered, I don't know what I'm supposed to do anymore, Grace. I don't know if I can handle this. And just like that, the gap between us grew wider. The following days were filled with silence. Caleb would retreat into his work, his phone, or even the television, but never to me. It was as if he were trying to distract himself from the inevitable. Our relationship was crumbling, and no matter how hard I tried to patch it together, the cracks were too deep. I found myself thinking more and more about Peter. It wasn't like I had developed feelings for him, not at all. But there was something about the way he treated me, how he was always patient, always understanding, that made me feel seen. In contrast, Caleb's constant suspicion and possessiveness made me feel trapped, as though I couldn't breathe without his permission. The strangest part? I didn't know what I was supposed to do next. I wanted to fight for my marriage, but how could I fight for something that felt like it was slipping away with every word Caleb said, every look of distrust in his eyes? But there was one thing I was sure of, I wasn't going to give up on myself. I couldn't. If I had to fight for my own sense of self-worth, I would. And I knew somehow that whatever happened next would change everything. The days bled into one another in a haze of tension and silence. I tried my best to ignore the growing sense of dread that weighed heavily in my chest, but it lingered like a storm cloud, threatening to burst at any moment. Caleb and I were no longer speaking as we used to. What was once comfortable, easy conversation now felt strained, awkward, like we were strangers occupying the same space, too afraid to touch, too afraid to break the fragile silence that hovered between us. I tried to busy myself with work. It was my escape, the only thing that still seemed to make sense. At the office, I could lose myself in tasks and meetings with my colleagues. It was in those hours that I felt free, like I could breathe again. But even there, something had shifted. Peter, who I had once considered just a professional acquaintance, was now hovering in my thoughts more often than I liked to admit. One afternoon, as I sat in the break room, Peter walked in with his usual easy smile. He greeted me with a quick wave, and something flickered in his eyes, something that I hadn't noticed before. A familiarity, a warmth that made me feel seen. It wasn't like how Caleb had always made me feel possessed, but it was something I hadn't realized I missed. How's everything going? Peter asked as he sat across from me, pouring himself some coffee. Same as always, I replied, forcing a smile, but there was something in his gaze that made me feel vulnerable. I looked away, staring at my cup of coffee to avoid his eyes. You know, if you ever need to talk, I'm here, Peter said, his tone gentle, like he was trying to offer me some form of relief I hadn't realized I needed. I didn't say anything immediately, just nodded in appreciation. I felt a pang of guilt sweep through me. I hadn't done anything wrong, but why did it feel like I was betraying Caleb by just having this conversation? It was ridiculous, I knew it, but the tension that had been growing in my marriage was starting to seep into every interaction I had, even the innocent ones. By the time I got home that evening, Caleb was already sitting on the couch, eyes glued to the TV, like he was avoiding me. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him, wondering how we had gotten here. How had we gone from being partners, sharing everything, to this cold distance between us? And why was I suddenly so unsure of what I was supposed to feel? "Hi," I said quietly, stepping into the living room. His eyes flicked up to mine, then quickly darted back to the screen. "Hey," Caleb muttered, not even bothering to take his eyes off the TV. I sighed, feeling the weight of it all, the lack of connection, the lack of trust. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. "I talked to Peter today," I said, almost as if testing the waters. His body tensed, and I immediately regretted the words the moment they left my mouth. "What about?" His voice was tight, clipped, like he was already on edge, expecting me to say something that would confirm his worst fears. "Nothing important. Just work stuff," I said, trying to sound casual, but my heart was pounding in my chest. Why did it feel like I was walking on a high wire? One wrong move and I'd fall. He was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was low, almost a whisper. "I don't like it when you talk to him like that. I don't like it at all." I felt my stomach tighten. "Caleb, I told you there's nothing going on. Why can't you trust me?" His eyes finally met mine, and there was a look in them, a mixture of pain and something darker, that I couldn't ignore. "It's not about trust, Grace. It's about you giving him more of your attention than me. I feel like I'm losing you, and I can't stand it." His words hit me like a slap. I felt my breath catch in my throat, but I couldn't find the right words to say. The truth was, I had been feeling that way too, that I was slowly losing him, even as I watched him slip further away from me. "I don't want to lose you either," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "But we're not going to get through this if you keep pushing me away." I could see the conflict in his eyes, the struggle between his need to control and his love for me. But it was starting to feel like love was no longer enough to hold us together. There was something missing, something we couldn't seem to fix, no matter how hard we tried. That night, as I lay in bed beside him, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were at a crossroads. The silence between us felt like a living, breathing thing, suffocating me. I thought about Peter, about how he'd seemed so easy to talk to, so unthreatening. But I wasn't stupid. I knew that the more I interacted with him, the more it would push Caleb over the edge. Yet, for some reason, I couldn't stop myself. The more Caleb pulled away, the more I found myself seeking comfort elsewhere, even if it was just in the simple conversations at work. The following day, Caleb didn't mention Peter at all, but I could tell he was still angry, still distant. We went about our day like two strangers, passing each other in the hallway, sharing nothing but awkward silences and forced smiles. I knew something had to change, but I had no idea how to make it right. I didn't know if Caleb and I could ever go back to the way things were. And the scariest part? I wasn't sure I wanted to anymore. It wasn't until the next weekend that I fully realized how bad things had gotten. Caleb had been home all day, his presence in the house like a looming shadow. He barely spoke, and when he did, his words were short and heavy. It was as though every sentence had to be pulled from him, and I found myself questioning whether the man I married was even still here. We had an event to attend that night, a friend's birthday party. It was one of those social occasions that we both usually looked forward to, an excuse to get out of the house and have fun together. But tonight felt different. Caleb didn't want to go, I could tell. His reluctance to even talk about it was a clear sign that he'd already checked out. Still, I pushed him, hoping it would snap him out of his mood, but I should have known better. We arrived at the venue, and the moment we walked in, I noticed something in Caleb's eyes, something that made my stomach churn. It wasn't just anger. It was suspicion. His gaze scanned the room, and the moment his eyes landed on Peter, who was talking to a group near the bar, Caleb's entire body tensed. He didn't even try to hide it. The muscles in his jaw tightened, his posture shifting to something colder. "Why are you looking at him like that?" I asked, my voice low, my heart beating faster than I'd like to admit. Caleb didn't respond. He just stared at Peter, and for a moment, I thought he might actually start a scene. I reached out to grab his arm, pulling him away from the crowd, hoping we could at least pretend to have a normal evening. "Let's just go say hi to our friends," I suggested, my voice as calm as I could make it. But he pulled away from me, eyes burning with frustration. "You don't get it, do you?" Caleb's voice was hushed, but there was no hiding the hurt in his words. "You're acting like nothing's wrong, but everything is. Every time you look at him, Every time you smile at him, it's like I don't even exist. I could feel my breath hitch in my throat. It wasn't the first time he'd said something like this, but the intensity in his voice made it feel like the weight of everything had just come crashing down. I had spent so much time trying to make things work, trying to be the perfect wife, that I hadn't even realized how much I had been holding back, how much I had let him control my every move without even questioning it. I took a step back, my mind racing. "Caleb, this is not healthy," I said, my voice trembling. "You can't keep pushing me away every time something makes you uncomfortable. I can't breathe like this. I can't live like this." For a moment he just stood there, his fists clenched at his sides. Then, something in his expression shifted. He looked broken, like everything he thought he understood was falling apart. He ran a hand through his hair, looking exhausted. "I'm sorry, Grace," he said quietly, but I could hear the edge in his voice. "I'm trying, but I can't help how I feel. I just can't let go of this feeling that you're slipping away." And just like that, the entire atmosphere shifted. The tension between us was suffocating. I wanted to cry, to scream, to do something to break free from this never-ending cycle of jealousy and guilt. But I couldn't. I was too exhausted, emotionally drained from trying to keep it all together. "Caleb," I said, my voice breaking, "I'm not slipping away. But I can't stay here in this relationship if I'm constantly being accused of things I haven't done. I can't keep losing myself just to keep you happy." His face twisted, a flash of anger crossing his features before he quickly masked it. He turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, my heart pounding in my chest. It felt like the entire room was spinning around me. I didn't know what had happened to us, to the love we once shared. All I knew was that I couldn't keep pretending. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Caleb didn't speak to me. We both found ourselves in different corners of the room, surrounded by people but completely isolated from one another. I tried to talk to some friends, but my thoughts kept drifting back to Caleb, how much he had changed, how much I had changed, how we had both become strangers in our own home. When we finally left the party, Caleb was silent in the car. The drive home felt endless. We didn't speak a word to each other. It was as if every word we said to one another only made things worse, only dug the hole between us deeper. I sat with my hands clenched in my lap, trying to keep it together, but the dam was breaking. "Grace," Caleb finally spoke as we pulled into the driveway, his voice barely a whisper. "I know you're upset, but I just don't know what to do anymore. I love you, but I can't keep living in this fear that you're going to leave me." My heart twisted. I knew he loved me. But I also knew that love wasn't enough anymore. Love couldn't fix what was broken. Not if we couldn't trust each other, not if we couldn't communicate without spiraling into arguments and accusations. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if there was anything left to say. I just nodded silently and got out of the car, leaving him behind in the dark. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a part of me close off too. I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't even know if I wanted to anymore. It's strange how quickly things can change. One minute, you think everything is fine, works fine, your relationship is fine, your life is fine, and the next, you realize you've been walking on a tightrope, and you slipped. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Caleb's footsteps in the kitchen. He hadn't left yet. We hadn't even spoken after the night before. I had hoped we'd find a way to fix things, but the silence between us felt like a weight I couldn't escape. As I made my way down the stairs, I saw him, hunched over a cup of coffee, his eyes red. He didn't look up as I entered the kitchen, as if he was still trying to figure out how to pretend nothing was wrong. "Caleb," I said, my voice softer than I intended. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the way I had been the night before. But the frustration, the confusion, it was still there, simmering under the surface. "We need to talk." He looked at me then, finally meeting my gaze. His eyes softened, but there was no relief in them, no sign of resolution. "What's there left to say, Grace?" His voice was barely audible, like he had already given up on fighting for us. "Don't talk like that," I replied quickly, walking over to him, needing to bridge the distance that had stretched between us. "You've been shutting me out for days. I don't know where we went wrong, but I can't keep pretending everything's fine either." For a long moment, he didn't respond. I could feel the heaviness of the silence pressing down on both of us. It was as if neither one of us could find the words that might break the tension, the unspoken fears that had been lingering for weeks. "I'm scared, Grace," Caleb finally said, his voice trembling. "I'm scared of losing you. I know I've been acting out of control and I can't stand it. But I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to make you see that I'm afraid of you, of him, of everything." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been so focused on my own feelings of being trapped, of feeling misunderstood, that I hadn't stopped to truly listen to his fears. I didn't realize how much pain he was in, how much of his own insecurity had taken over. It wasn't just about Peter. It wasn't about the late-night texts, the lunches, or the small smiles I shared with him. Caleb's fear ran deeper. It was about losing me, about losing control over the life we had built together. I sat down beside him, placing my hand gently on his. "Caleb, I'm not going anywhere. But we can't keep living like this in fear. You can't keep controlling me like this. We have to rebuild what we lost, but we have to do it together." He nodded slowly, but I could see the doubt still clouding his eyes. "How do we do that? How do we go back to normal when it feels like everything's falling apart?" I didn't have an answer. I didn't know how to fix what had been broken between us. But I knew we had to try. I had to try. Because, despite everything, I still loved him. And I wasn't ready to give up on us just yet. The rest of the day passed in a blur of half-hearted attempts at normalcy. We talked about work, about the things we usually talked about when life was simpler. But the tension never fully left. Caleb was quieter than usual, and I could sense that even as he tried to make small talk, his mind was elsewhere, still churning over everything we hadn't resolved. I couldn't blame him. I was doing the same thing. That evening I decided I needed a break. I needed space to think, to breathe. I suggested I take a walk around the block, just to clear my head. Caleb didn't argue. In fact, he seemed relieved. Maybe he needed space too, to figure out what he was truly afraid of. As I walked through the neighborhood, my thoughts swirled. Everything I thought I knew about Caleb, about our relationship, was starting to crack. The man I had married, the man I had trusted, was no longer the person standing beside me. He had been overtaken by something darker, something I couldn't even name. And Peter, Peter. The more I tried to push him out of my thoughts, the more I found myself thinking about him. Not in a romantic way, not exactly, but he had become a symbol for everything I was missing in my marriage. I couldn't help but wonder, was I falling into the trap of needing someone else to fill the emotional void that Caleb had created? Or was I just looking for validation, for someone who could see me the way I had been longing to be seen? I knew I couldn't keep going on like this, torn between two worlds. And the scariest part was that I didn't know which one I was supposed to choose. When I returned home that evening, Caleb was sitting on the couch again, his laptop open in front of him, but his eyes weren't focused on the screen. He was staring into space, lost in his thoughts. "I'm sorry," he said, breaking the silence when he saw me. "I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know how to stop feeling this way." I sat down beside him, my heart aching for him, for us. "I don't have all the answers, Caleb. But we can't keep going like this. We need to talk to someone. We need help." He didn't answer immediately, but I could see the faintest hint of agreement in his eyes. Maybe, just maybe, he was starting to see that we couldn't fix this on our own. We needed something more than just each other. We needed help, whether it came from therapy or from somewhere else. We couldn't do this in isolation anymore. It was a small step, but it was a step forward. And that was more than I had expected to have that night. It felt strange, sitting in the therapist's office, the air thick with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and leather chairs. I had never imagined my life would come to this, sitting across from a stranger, a professional, trying to unravel what had been broken between Caleb and me. But there we were, two people who once loved each other, now struggling to even speak without it turning into an argument. We had both agreed that we needed help after that night when Caleb had finally admitted his fears. I had tried so hard to hold on to us, to hold on to him, but somewhere along the way we'd both lost our way. Caleb had insisted on coming, though I could tell that he was just as unsure as I was. Neither of us had ever been to therapy before, and it felt like the last step we could take before our marriage slipped through our fingers for good. As we sat there, the therapist, Dr. Lee, asked simple questions, basic stuff that seemed almost too obvious, like asking us to talk about our relationship history. But the more I spoke, the more I realized how far apart Caleb and I had become. "We've been married for 7 years," I said, trying to sound composed. "But it feels like the trust we built is starting to crumble. It's like there's a wall between us now. I can feel it. I can't keep pretending everything is fine when it isn't." Caleb shifted in his seat, eyes cast downward. He never looked at me directly. He hadn't looked at me that way in days. He was avoiding the reality of it, as if facing it would make it worse. "I don't know how to stop it," he said, his voice tight. "I don't know how to stop feeling like I'm losing her." Dr. Lee leaned forward, her voice calm and steady. "It's okay to feel like you're losing each other. But let's talk about why that's happening. What is it that you feel, Caleb? What is it about Peter that's affecting you this way?" Caleb flinched at the mention of Peter, and I saw his jaw tighten. The tension in the room grew thicker, and I knew he wasn't ready to say what he really felt. But Dr. Lee was patient. She gave him space, allowing the silence to settle between us. Finally, Caleb spoke, his voice quiet. I don't like it. The way she talks to him. The way she smiles around him. I can't help it. Every time she's with him, I feel like she's slipping away from me. Like she doesn't need me anymore. I swallowed hard, the pain of his words hitting me deep. I had never thought of it this way. I never realized how badly Caleb was hurting. I never realized that my attempts to maintain some normalcy at work, just small conversations, simple interactions, had made him feel abandoned, neglected. I never meant to make you feel like that, I said, my voice trembling. You have to understand, I didn't want this to happen. It's just that I need to feel like myself again. I need to feel like I have my own identity, my own life, apart from you. Caleb's eyes shot up to meet mine for the first time in what felt like forever. There was a flicker of realization there, something deep, something that made me think maybe, just maybe, he was starting to understand. I know, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I know, but I can't shake the feeling that I'm losing you to him. I felt a heavy weight in my chest. This wasn't about Peter at all. It never had been. It was about Caleb's deep-rooted insecurities, his need to control me, to keep me in a box that only he could understand. And as much as I loved him, I realized that I had allowed myself to be shaped by his fear, by his need to keep me tethered to him. I didn't want to lose him, but I couldn't keep losing myself in the process. Something had to change. We both had to change. The session ended and we left Dr. Lee's office in silence, both of us too drained to speak. Caleb still wasn't ready to talk about Peter, but I had a feeling that wasn't the real issue anymore. The real issue was us. Our marriage, our trust, and our ability to communicate, or rather, our inability to communicate. That night, after we got home, I didn't want to argue. I didn't want to scream, to push him away like I'd done so many times before. I just wanted to hold him, to remind both of us that we could still find our way back to each other. So when Caleb sat on the edge of the bed, head hung low, I sat beside him. Caleb, we can't keep living like this, I whispered. I can't keep living like this. We need to start over from the beginning. No more secrets. No more accusations. Can you do that with me? Can we try? He didn't answer right away, and for a moment, I thought he might pull away again, retreat into his anger and fear. But then he turned to face me, and for the first time in days, I saw a glimmer of the man I had married. I don't know how to fix this, Grace, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But I want to try. I want to stop hurting you, stop hurting myself. I want us to work. But I need you to help me too. I nodded, feeling a tear slip down my cheek. This was the moment, the turning point. We didn't have all the answers and we wouldn't fix everything in one night. But we were starting to rebuild. Together. The next morning, when Caleb kissed me goodbye as he left for work, it wasn't like the other mornings. There was something different in his touch, something soft and tender that reminded me we weren't completely lost yet. And for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back. The days that followed felt like a strange dance, one where neither Caleb nor I were entirely sure of our next move. It was as though we were both walking on fragile ground, afraid that even the smallest misstep would send us tumbling into the abyss. We had talked about starting fresh, about being open with one another, but something was still missing. I could see it in Caleb's eyes, the doubt, the lingering insecurity that still held him hostage. And I could feel it in myself, too. I was so focused on protecting my own sense of self, so focused on finding my way back to who I was, that I couldn't help but wonder, could I still trust him? Could we still trust each other? That afternoon, as I sat at my desk at work, going through emails, I felt the familiar buzz of my phone vibrating in my bag. At first, I thought it was just a random notification, but then I noticed the name on the screen, Caleb. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected him to reach out to me during the day. He'd been distant, quiet, and I wondered if I was just overthinking things. I grabbed my phone and answered before it could ring a second time. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual, though my voice betrayed a hint of nervousness. Grace, Caleb's voice was unusually soft, almost hesitant. I need to talk to you. It's important. I straightened up, instantly alert. There was a certain tone in his voice, something that made my pulse quicken. He wasn't angry, he wasn't defensive, but there was a vulnerability there that I hadn't heard in his voice for a long time. What's going on? I asked, my stomach tightening. I've been thinking about what we talked about last night, he began, his words slow, deliberate. And I realized something. I've been so focused on my own fears, my own insecurities, that I haven't really listened to you. I've been controlling, and I know that's not what you need. I don't want to be the one who makes you feel trapped anymore. I'm sorry. The weight of his apology hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't realized how badly I had been longing for him to say those words. I had needed him to acknowledge the pain he had caused, to admit that he saw the way his actions had affected me. And now that he had, it felt like a small, fragile thread of hope had been woven between us again. I don't know what to say, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to lose you, Caleb. But I can't keep losing myself either. We need to find a way to make this work together. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment I thought the conversation was over. But then Caleb spoke again, his voice softer now, almost like a confession. I want to make it work, Grace. I really do. But I need you to help me too. I don't want to be this person who keeps pushing you away, who keeps doubting you. I don't know how to let go of my fears. I felt a lump form in my throat, a mix of sadness and relief flooding through me. This wasn't going to be easy. The road ahead of us was long, and there was still so much we needed to work through. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like we were on the same page, like we were finally both willing to try. We'll figure it out, I said, my words steady. But we have to promise each other that we'll be honest. No more hiding, no more pretending everything's fine when it isn't. I promise, he said, the sincerity in his voice clear. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. After we hung up, I sat there for a moment, letting the quiet settle around me. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know if we could fix everything, or if the damage had already been done. But I knew one thing, we were trying, and that was more than I had expected. The rest of the day passed in a daze. I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation, replaying his words in my mind. Caleb had acknowledged his mistakes, but I couldn't help but wonder, was it enough? Could we rebuild what had been broken, or was it too late? Later that evening, when I walked through the front door, I saw Caleb sitting on the couch, looking up at me with a mixture of hope and fear in his eyes. The moment I stepped inside, everything seemed to shift. There was a vulnerability in the air, an openness that hadn't been there before. Caleb stood up as I walked into the living room, his eyes never leaving mine. I've been thinking, he began, his voice steady, though there was a hint of uncertainty behind it. I want to try again. I know it's not going to be easy, but I don't want to live in fear anymore. I want to be better. For us. I could see the sincerity in his eyes, but there was still something unspoken that hung in the air. Was I ready to forgive him fully? Was I ready to trust him again? I wasn't sure. Not yet. But I knew that this was the first step. The first real step toward healing. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away, Caleb said, his voice breaking slightly. I know I've hurt you and I can't take that back. But I want to try, Grace. Please give me a chance. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. This wasn't just about Caleb anymore. It was about me too. About what I needed, about what I was willing to accept. And right now I wasn't sure what that was. But one thing was clear, we couldn't keep living in this endless loop of hurt and fear. If we were going to move forward, we both had to let go of the past. I'm willing to try too, I said, my voice steady but uncertain. But we need time. Time to fix this. Caleb nodded, his expression softening. I'll wait as long as it takes. I didn't have the answers. I didn't know if this was the beginning of something better or just another false hope. But at that moment, I finally allowed myself to believe that we had a chance. Days passed and the tension between Caleb and me began to slowly unravel. We had taken the first step, and though the road ahead was still uncertain, there was a glimmer of hope between us. We kept our promise to be honest, to communicate openly, even when it was uncomfortable. It wasn't always easy, there were moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if we were fooling ourselves, but there was also something powerful in our willingness to face the truth together. Caleb and I had our moments of vulnerability when we would sit down, eyes locked, and talk about our fears, his fears of losing me and my fears of losing myself. Slowly, with each conversation, I felt myself letting go of the resentment that had built up, and Caleb, though it was a slow process, began to trust again. We were learning how to be vulnerable with each other without the fear of judgment. We decided to take it one day at a time. Caleb didn't try to control me anymore. He let me have my space, my friendships, my work relationships because he knew deep down that they were a part of who I was. And in return, I gave him the reassurance he needed. I showed him that he was still my partner, that no one could take his place. We stopped seeing Peter as the problem and started seeing each other's insecurities as something to work through, not blame for everything that had gone wrong. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. Caleb came home one evening, looking more energized than I had seen him in months. He had been working on a new project at work, one that he had been passionate about for a while. When he walked in, there was a lightness in his step that hadn't been there before. "Grace," he said, his voice full of excitement, "I got a promotion today." I looked up from the book I was reading, surprised by the joy in his voice. "That's amazing, Caleb. Congratulations." He smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his entire face. "It feels like things are finally starting to come together, you know? I've been so focused on us, on fixing everything, that I forgot to focus on myself, on what I need. And I think I'm finally starting to get it. We're going to be okay." I felt my heart swell as I realized how much progress we had made. There was still work to do, but we were no longer stuck in that endless cycle of distrust and fear. Caleb had found something for himself again, something that reminded him of his own worth, and I had found my own peace too. I wasn't just the woman I was for Caleb anymore. I was Grace, someone with my own identity, my own strength. That night, we celebrated his promotion in a way that felt right, simple, honest, and full of love. No pretenses, no guilt, just us. I looked at Caleb across the dinner table, and for the first time in a long while, I saw the man I had fallen in love with. He was still there, he just needed to remember who he was, just as I had needed to remember who I was. As we clinked our glasses together, I felt a warmth in my chest, a warmth that told me this was the beginning of something better. We weren't perfect and our relationship wasn't flawless, but we had something that many people didn't: the willingness to grow, to change, and to forgive. And as I looked into Caleb's eyes that night, I realized that despite everything we had been through, we were still in this together. We had made it through the storm, and the future, though uncertain, suddenly didn't seem so daunting anymore. We had each other, and that was enough. We had survived the hardest part, now we could rebuild. Together.